I never planned to save an alien queen. I planned to clock in, weld conduit seams for 10 hours, clock out, and go home to a tiny apartment that smelled faintly of oil and recycled air. That was my life on Hestia 9, an industrial moon owned by 3 megacorporations and 1 indifferent interstellar council. I was a human factory worker, imported labor, cheap and replaceable. At least, that's what everyone thought. The day everything changed started like any other. The factory alarms hummed at dawn, the artificial sun panels brightened, and the line supervisors barked orders in half a dozen languages. I pulled on my gloves, sealed my respirator, and took my place along conveyor line 7, where we assembled pressure housings for deep space engines, massive, ugly machines bound for alien warships I'd never see. Hestia 9 wasn't exactly friendly to humans. We were tolerated, nothing more. The dominant species here were the Keeler, tall, insectoid, armored beings with faceted eyes and rigid social hierarchies. They ruled the local systems through sheer industrial might and an empire-old bureaucracy that crushed dissent efficiently and quietly. I'd learned to keep my head down. That's why it surprised everyone, including me, when the Keeler royal procession arrived at our factory. The entire assembly line shut down. Security drones descended from the ceiling. Overseers barked for silence. The Keeler didn't visit labor zones unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. Then I saw her. The alien queen of the Keeler ascendancy, carried on a hovering biopalanquin of living metal and light. Her exoskeleton shimmered in shades of deep violet and gold, etched with ceremonial sigils older than humanity's first cities. Her eyes, huge, multifaceted, scanned the factory floor with a sharp intelligence that made my spine tighten. She didn't belong here, and she was dying. I didn't know that yet, not fully. I just noticed the subtle tremor in her limbs, the way the biopalanquin stabilizers kept overcorrecting. The scent hit me next, sharp, metallic, wrong. My grandfather had been a machinist on Earth, and he used to say you could smell when something was failing. The queen was failing. Her retinue clustered around her, whispering in rapid clicks and pheromonal signals. Panic rippled through them, barely contained beneath layers of protocol. One of the royal engineers, a Keeler with reinforced thoracic plating, stepped forward and announced, in heavily accented trade common, that the queen required immediate mechanical stabilization. The factory's chief engineers had already failed. That was when their eyes turned to the humans. Specifically to me. I was elbow deep in a pressure housing when a security drone hovered inches from my face. A synthesized voice ordered me to step away from the line. I thought I was about to be fired or executed. Instead, I was escorted through layers of security and brought before the queen herself. Up close, the damage was obvious. The queen wasn't purely biological. Like many high-ranking Keeler, she was symbiotic, her body integrated with ancient biomechanical systems passed down through royal lineage. Those systems regulated her metabolism, extended her lifespan, and interfaced directly with the Ascendancy's planetary command network. And they were breaking down. The royal engineers explained the problem in clinical terms. A core regulator had fractured during hyperspace transit. Replacement parts were unavailable on Hestia 9. Without stabilization, the Queen's internal systems would cascade into total failure within hours. Their technology was beyond me, but the failure pattern wasn't. I'd seen it before. Not in a queen or a palace or a warship. I'd seen it in engines pushed past spec limits. In heat exchangers stressed by bad alloys. In machines designed to be elegant instead of durable. I spoke before I could stop myself. "It's not the regulator," I said. My voice sounded small in the vast chamber. "It's the housing around it. Microfractures. Stress feedback loop. You keep replacing the part, it'll keep failing. The chamber went silent. The royal engineers stared at me like I'd insulted their ancestors. One demanded to know how a human laborer could possibly understand Keeler royal technology. I shrugged, because honesty was easier than fear. I fix what breaks. Doesn't matter who built it. The queen turned her gaze fully on me. I felt it then, pressure, not physical but mental. A vast, disciplined intelligence brushing against my thoughts. Testing. Measuring. Then she spoke, not aloud, but directly into my mind. You perceive truth where my own architects did not. The sensation nearly dropped me to my knees. She ordered her engineers to stand aside. Against every protocol they had, the life of the Keeler Queen rested in the hands of a human factory worker. They brought me diagnostic tools I barely recognized. Interfaces flickered in alien script. I ignored most of it. Instead, I listened to vibrations, to thermal gradients, to the subtle hum of systems straining against themselves. The housing around the Queen's core was over-engineered and under-supported. Designed to impress, not endure. A flaw hidden by centuries of incremental patches and ritualized maintenance. I requested raw materials. The engineers balked. Royal systems were not to be modified. They were sacred. The Queen overruled them. I scavenged reinforced alloys from the factory floor, ugly, utilitarian stuff meant for mining equipment and deep space cargo haulers. I reshaped the housing manually, bracing it in ways no Keeler designer ever would have considered. Redundant supports. Stress distribution channels. Nothing elegant. Everything effective. As I worked, alarms spiked and fell. The Queen's vitals fluctuated wildly. At one point, her consciousness flickered, and the pressure in my mind weakened. I thought I'd failed. Then the system stabilized. The tremor stopped. The scent of failure faded. The Queen inhaled, deep, steady, and her eyes refocused with terrifying clarity. I'd done it. The royal chamber erupted into controlled chaos. Engineers scrambled to analyze the changes. Guards tightened formation. Advisors whispered urgently. The Queen rose from her biopalanquin under her own power. She looked down at me. You saved my life, she said, mind to mind.
Why?
I didn't have a heroic answer. Because it was broken, I said. And I know how to fix broken things. That answer seemed to amuse her. The aftermath was complicated. News spread fast. Faster than I expected. The Keeler ascendancy didn't like surprises, and they hated debt. Especially to a species they considered inferior. I was detained, not imprisoned, exactly, but not free either. For days, I answered questions from scientists, strategists, and political operatives. They wanted to know how much I understood. What humans were capable of. Whether this was a fluke. The Queen intervened again. She summoned me to the royal audience chamber, this time fully restored, her systems humming with power far beyond what I'd felt before. She told me the truth. The Keeler ascendancy was stagnating. Their technology had become ritualized, their innovation constrained by hierarchy and tradition. They built marvels, but no longer understood them. Humanity, by contrast, was chaotic, adaptive, and brutally practical. Dangerous. Valuable. The Queen offered me a choice. I could return to Hestia, 9, compensated beyond my wildest dreams, my role officially erased to preserve political balance.
Or I could stay.
Serve as a royal technical liaison. An outsider with permission to question sacred designs. To break what needed breaking. To help an empire survive itself. I thought about my apartment. My factory line. The way everyone looked through humans instead of at us. Then I thought about the Queen's failing systems. Perfect on paper, useless in practice. I'll stay, I said. That decision changed everything. Over the following months, human engineers were quietly invited into Keeler research divisions. Not as equals, not yet, but as problem solvers. We didn't design beautiful things. We designed things that worked after 1,000 failures. The Ascendancy's warships became uglier. They also became unstoppable. When border conflicts flared, Keeler fleets held together under stress that would have shattered them before. When sabotage struck, systems rerouted instead of collapsing. When enemies adapted, the Keeler adapted faster. Other species noticed. So did the Interstellar Council. Whispers spread of a human influence behind the Ascendancy's resurgence. Some feared it. Some sought it. Human workers across Keeler space found conditions improving, not out of kindness, but necessity. The Queen never forgot who started it. Years later, when an assassination attempt targeted her core systems again, this time deliberate, precise, deadly, it was human redundancies that saved her. Systems layered upon systems, brute force backups designed by people who assumed failure as a baseline. The conspirators were exposed. The old guard was dismantled. The Ascendancy changed. As for me, I never went back to the factory line. I stood beside the alien queen as she addressed the council chambers, her presence commanding silence across species and stars. She spoke of strength, not as dominance, but resilience. Of perfection, not as elegance, but endurance. Of humanity, not as conquerors, but as builders who refuse to let things break quietly. And when she was done, she looked at me, not as a subject or a tool, but as an equal. Once, the life of an alien queen rested in the hands of a human factory worker. Now, the future of an empire rested on the same principle humanity had always lived by: if it's broken, fix it. The galaxy did not change overnight. Empires never do. What changed first were the margins, the places where systems failed quietly and people used to die without anyone important noticing. Keeler logistics hubs stopped losing entire fleets to cascading reactor failures. Medical stations no longer collapsed when one sacred component malfunctioned. Mining colonies survived seismic events that should have wiped them out. Every fix shared one trait: redundancy layered on redundancy, brutally inelegant and impossible to ignore. Human thinking had infected the Ascendancy. The old Keeler priest engineers hated it. They argued that tradition was being defiled, that sacred schematics were being violated, that allowing humans to alter royal systems invited chaos. They were right about one thing: chaos had arrived. But it was the kind that worked. The breaking point came 3 years after I saved the Queen, when the Ascendancy faced extinction. An extragalactic force emerged from beyond mapped space, something ancient and computationally hostile. Not conquerors, not negotiators, eradicators. Their weapons didn't target hulls or shields. They targeted assumptions. Systems failed in ways no Keeler doctrine accounted for: perfectly symmetrical attacks that unraveled elegant designs like thread pulled from silk. Entire fleets vanished in minutes. Council worlds burned. For the first time in 10,000 cycles, the Keeler Ascendancy prepared for collapse. The Queen summoned me alone, not as a technician, not as an advisor, but as something unprecedented. Her equal. "You taught us to assume failure," she said, her voice resonating directly inside my mind. "Now, we must assume extinction."
I didn't bow.
I didn't kneel. I met her gaze. "Then we stop building things that only work when everything goes right." She authorized Project Bastion. Not a superweapon. A philosophy. Human engineers, factory workers, mechanics, welders, miners were pulled from across Keeler space. People who fixed broken things for a living. People who expected systems to fail and planned accordingly. We rewrote the Ascendancy's entire war doctrine in months. Ships were rebuilt mid-flight. Control hierarchies flattened. Command nodes became decentralized. No single point of failure remained sacred. When the Eradicators struck again, they encountered something new. A fleet that refused to break the way it was supposed to. Ships lost half their systems and kept fighting. Networks shattered and reformed autonomously. Destroyed vessels detonated deliberately to shield others. Ugly tactics. Effective ones. The Eradicators retreated. For the first time in recorded galactic history, something older than civilization itself learned to fear improvisation. The victory changed everything. The Interstellar Council demanded explanations.
They demanded me.
The Queen refused. Instead, she stood before the assembled species and delivered a declaration that rewrote galactic politics. The age of perfect empires is over, she said. The age of resilient civilizations has begun. She acknowledged humanity publicly, not as servants, not as allies, but as architects of survival. The backlash was immediate and pointless. Human methods spread faster than fear ever could. Independent worlds adopted human redundancies. Trade networks hired human laborers not for strength, but for mindset. Even ancient species began quietly dismantling sacred systems and replacing them with ugly, functional ones. As for me, I never wore royal armor, never took a title. I returned to where I belonged. Workshops, shipyards, repair bays, standing beside beings of a dozen species, sleeves rolled up, fixing what everyone else said couldn't be fixed. Sometimes the Queen would visit. Not with guards, not with ceremony. She would watch silently as I worked, her presence bending the air around her. Once, years later, she asked me a question she had never asked before. If you had failed that first day, she said, if my life had ended on Hestia 9, what would humanity have become? I wiped my hands on a rag and shrugged. Same as always, I said. We'd survive. We always do. Maybe louder. Maybe angrier. She considered that. Then she said something that echoed across history. That, she said, is why the future belongs to you. Not because humans were strongest. Not because we were smartest. But because when the universe broke, we didn't worship the damage. We fixed it. Once, the life of an alien queen rested in the hands of a human factory worker. Now, entire civilizations rested on the same principle.